next year, but we're not quite there yet. So I've already given somewhat of an introduction to myself. My name is Eric Boone. I'm here representing my company, Mathematics, which does advanced predictive and prescriptive analytics. But I want to open up our conference today with a bit of a different story, actually. We're not going to talk about business. We're going to talk about, we've had a regulated market in the United States now. We probably started with Prop 215 in California in 1996, which brought that medical program online. And in that amount of time, we have learned a lot, but as an industry, we've made a tremendous number of mistakes as well. So I'm not here today to say, oh, here I am from the United States, here I am from North America, I'm going to tell you how it's done. No, that's not what I'm here to do today. I'm actually here to say, here's how we screwed up. There were a lot of mistakes that we made, and even though the cannabis plant itself has been regulated for over 25 years at this point, obviously the plant itself has been around much longer than that. Here's just a few. I'm honored today to also have brought my friend Dan Herr, the son of the famous Jack Herr. I don't know who else heard of Jack. He's absolutely famous hemp activist. Wrote The Emperor Wears No Clothes, a true Bible for those of us in the cannabis industry. Like I said, I'm going to be moving over here, and I'll just put my that's us right here. My wife has been good enough to join me today, and then I've got two young boys as well who are looking forward to terrorizing you all. Portuguese shorts. Here's a picture of Seattle Hemp Fest. In our heyday, we were gathering 250,000 people down Seattle waterfront to discuss. And it's such a happy vibe, right on the waterfront. The smell is beautiful. Just the entire air filled with the smell of sweet cannabis. And I understand that they like festivals in Portugal as well. So I think it's going to fit in really nicely here, and I'm looking forward to it. But our talk today, I digress, is going to be revolved around social equity in cannabis. Specifically, this has been an industry that we've had for a long time, but the nature of it has shifted considerably. That's what I'd like to talk about today. Let's take a quick look at the history of cannabis. I mean, in the United States, where it's illegal, our founding fathers, that's George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they were both really well-known hemp farmers, prolific hemp farmers, very likely hemp consumers as well. So this is one of the first American flags, completely made out of hemp. So in a lot of ways, the United States was kind of founded on hemp. A lot of our foundation, for a lot of the years, farmers were actually required to grow the plant. It wasn't just legal. It was an absolute necessity. And this really should come as no surprise to anyone here, because hundreds of years before the United States was even a dream in anyone's mind, Portuguese seafarers were conquering the ocean with the powerful caravel. And as we all know, all of this, the sails, the rigging, that's all hemp. The sealant for the boards within the ship, also made of hemp. So even though I can claim to the United States only to the hemp plant, I think we can say that Portugal owes a lot of its early history to the power of the cannabis plant as well. So this has been a phenomenal gift for mankind forever, but things took a bit of a wrong turn in the early 20th century. It was around 1910 that the Mexican War, the Mexican Revolutionary War was taking place, and a lot of Mexican immigrants were refugees were flowing into the United States, and you had a bunch of simple-minded, closed-minded people that had quite racist views that were in trying to figure out ways to keep this influx of people into the United States. And one of the main people in this regard in the 1920s was Harry Anslinger. He was the the founder of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which we know today as the Drug Enforcement Agency. He was the United States' first drug czar. And under Anslinger, who was made very publicly racist statements about the nature of the United States, who the United States should belong to, who the right people were. And as a result of this, he started a very sinister plan to really associate different plants, different drugs with different substances with different races. And the cannabis plant itself fell heavily on the shoulders of Black and Hispanic communities in the United States. It was a cultural thing for a lot of them. It ended up becoming the noose that was hanging. He associated the plant with those races and criminalized the plant, thus criminalizing the people using it. And we saw this pattern continue to develop throughout the years. It really kept on going throughout the 40s and the 50s, and then it took another step forward in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. The Nixon administration was particularly bad. I don't know if, for those of you familiar, Richard Milhouse, Nixon, he was a president of the United States that was actually kicked out. He was our only actually impeached president that resigned. But he was really upset with the culture war that was going on. The Vietnam War was going on. The hippies were out in force, demanding free love, demanding more freedom, and you also had social equity, such as the Black Panthers, that were starting to raise some very important conversations around equality and equity within the framework of the United States. And this did not settle well with the powers that be. And so Richard Nixon really hit the gas on the drug war. And interestingly, today is June 18th, 2022. It was on June 18th in 1971 that Richard Nixon had a press conference in which he declared the war on drugs. The public enemy number one is drug abuse. That particular press conference actually happened 51 years ago today. So that just gives you an idea of, we've come a long ways in some ways, but in a lot of others, we have not. But under Richard Nixon, the drug war took another nefarious leap forward. In 1961, he managed, because of all of these treaties that were originally established under Anslinger 30 years previously, he started adding cannabis to these lists of substances. And all of a sudden, cannabis became essentially illegal globally as a result of Nixon taking his message to a global level. And then this kept on going in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we started the DARE program, the Drug Abuse Resistance Education. This was a way of putting police officers in schools. And I'm sure everyone's very aware of what's been going on with police officers and shootings in schools. It's just become a very dangerous, not very nurturing environment for students at this point. And a lot of this ties back to, putting police in schools. And it should come as no surprise that when the police go into schools, the Black and brown students are punished at a rate of about 3.5 times their white counterparts. A lot of the racial profiling that we see among police in the United States continues on into the schools. And what this has essentially done is created this school-to-prison pipeline where they literally start criminalizing children while they're still in high school and pump them directly into the U.S. for-profit prison system. And it's been really bad. It has, and you can see what, it's essentially 80% of our prison population right now comprised of Black and brown individuals in jail for cannabis possession in federal prison, and yet they only represent about 30% of the total population. So the imbalance is profound. There's our friend Rudy Giuliani. Everyone knows him. He lost his mind a little bit, well, several times in his life. But he was the mayor of New York City in the 90s and was responsible for the stop and frisk, where essentially police could stop you for any reason. It was probably going to be based on the color of your skin and pat you down for weapons, drugs, whatever. And if there were no charges to be filed, sometimes they would be made up. So this had a tremendous impact of, once again, emphasizing the connection between drugs and race and causing the criminality that we see today. And so what we can essentially see is, starting from the very 1930s up through today, there's been a very dedicated effort to maintain this connection between race. We've had like a restoration of this policy fairly consistently throughout the last 100 years. And what that has done is essentially made this great imbalanced system that we have today, where all of the people in jail are the people who essentially established this industry. It's pretty messed up. But now we can see this has gotten even more insulting, because now, what does cannabis look like in the United States? In Canada, they've already fully legalized recreational and adult use. In the United States, we're not too far behind. You can see 19 states in the US out of 50 now allow for adult use recreational cannabis. Adding states all the time. You've got a bunch more that have medical or have highly good restrictions for low THC or CBD products. So effectively, there are only 3 states in the US, Kansas, Nebraska, and Idaho, that don't allow any form of cannabis anymore. And if you're in Idaho, Washington and Oregon are some of the best cannabis growing states. Do you think the people in Idaho really have much of any problem getting a hold of some of this cannabis? I mean, the regulatory framework is full of holes. But what it has done is that it has allowed a tremendous number of people who look like me to make a tremendous amount of money in this industry, while the people who actually created the grassroots industry are sitting in prison for the very same product that well-capitalized, predominantly white men are making a tremendous amount of money. And we're here to try to share some of the lessons behind that and how we can do better. So, what are some of the 3 main barriers to entry that a lot of these minority candidates are facing? Well, they don't have access to capital. They don't have any generational wealth. You know, people who look like me, they sometimes do tap into generational wealth, or they have a much better time getting traditional debt financing. With the banking situation the way it is in the United States, no one really has access to traditional bank financing because cannabis is still federally illegal. So big banks still won't touch it. Once again, that cuts off a lot of financing supplies for a lot of people. So we simply cannot access the money. This is just a really precarious retailer. This is a cannabis shop in Seattle. Definitely not your traditional aesthetic that we would use. It definitely caters to a very specific, very wealthy market. So unless you're coming into this industry with a big sack of money, and you look like this, you're probably going to end up in prison. And that's what we're trying to do. Really, really bad situation. And the thing is, here in Europe, it's not nearly as bad. But you're also much earlier in the decriminalization process than Europe. Legalization is going to come to European shores as well. And it's going to come quickly. But we've had a bit more time to mess up in the United States, and we've seen it as well. But I mean, you can see patterns of this in Europe. I mean, in France, you get a lot of the enforcement of the North African immigrants that necessarily aren't enforced as much with the white personality. Here in Portugal, even Gunazo was telling me that you have people who are growing 10 plants that are arrested, having their parents, and that's one of the most liberal social policies toward cannabis on the planet. So if it can still happen here, there's still a lot of things to be done. And that's what I'd like to talk about next, is really what can we do. And that's why I'd like to take a little bit of time to share some ideas on what we can do as the regulatory guardrails start to fall in Europe, here's some ideas on what we can do to do better. And I actually consulted a lot of professionals in the industry to come up with this list, but I'd like to give special mention to Shailene Title, who is actually the founding commissioner for the Marijuana Commission in the state of Massachusetts. And she's no longer in that role, but Massachusetts was extremely progressive in instituting a lot of these social equity programs. And I've drawn heavily from your experience in this, and we'd like to give a special mention. So let me just go over a few different strategies on how we can sort of reverse this nefarious trend. When you bring a legal program online, automatically expunge the records of all non-violent criminals. Now, people are getting into trouble and hurting people as a result of this. That's not cool. But a lot of these people are just ill people in pain, people who are stressed, people who want a little bit of medicine. It's natural. It's not addictive. And if they end up in jail for it, and then you legalize it, get rid of those records. They don't need to carry that for the rest of their life. Taxation. Taxation is always the driving force behind these legalizations. And the taxes almost inevitably end up going into the general fund, which are then distributed to largely police departments, which causes more enforcement. So essentially you're perpetuating the cycle with this. So take some of those, instead of getting those funds earmarked into law enforcement, let's get some of those into making these programs happen. Underwrite some of the businesses from these from applicants from these disproportionately impacted communities. Give them access to the resources and capital they need. Finally, when you're coming up, or third, when you're coming up with your regulatory agencies, the agencies that actually come up with the laws, how they're enforced, what the penalties are, make sure that the disproportionately impacted communities are represented there strongly. Once again, you see that the regulatory agencies in a lot of these states, they all look kind of like me. The decision makers themselves need to draw from a diverse pool of candidates. Homegrown. This is actually really interesting in Washington because we don't allow people to grow their own cannabis at home. It was thought that it would be too much of a threat to the market. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like saying, oh, I brew my own beer at home. I'm never going to go to the store and buy some commercial beer. It's not something that's meant to supplement in a lot of ways. The other thing is, homegrown has been shown in markets where it exists have pretty much no impact on the retail market, but it is also an important guardrail against monopolistic competition. When you have the big guys come in, we've seen big tobacco come in, and now we're seeing the emergence of big cannabis. If you have a lot of small producers that are able to even gift a small amount of their product to the marketplace, you have a strong defense against them. Again, with the taxes, earmark funds provide technical assistance. Don't just give social equity candidates money. Give them the skills to build businesses. Once again, if you are incarcerated on a felony, you can't access student loans. And the education system in the United States right now is obscenely expensive. So if you can't get loans, chances are you're not going to go to school. If you were incarcerated for a drug offense, you're not going to get loans, you're not going to go to college, you're not going to develop the skills necessary to develop a business plan, attract financiers, and get financing for your product. Earmark some of these funds to bring that up to balance. Require all applicants to have a diversity plan within their applications. Make sure that the people who are submitting applications are doing it the right way. That's pretty much self-explanatory. Also, there are different sorts of licenses. This is the final point that I'd like to mention, because in the United States, we've broken it up into different categories. You can be a grower, you can be a processor, you can be a retailer, you can be a distributor, and some of these have much lower barriers to entry than others. Delivery services, for instance, very inexpensive to start up. If there's a lower barrier to entry, that would naturally be a better fit for social equity candidates who have less access to capital. Designate certain of these licenses specifically to social equity candidates. Delivery, consumption lounges. this is another big one in the United States that I think could be huge over here. Just a nice, relaxed place where you can sit and enjoy a little bit of cannabis. Another low barrier to entry. If you designate that these particular licenses are specifically for social equity candidates, it's a way for them to always have one foot in the door. So there's still a lot of work to take, still to go, but this hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea as the regulatory framework starts to collapse, how we can do better in Europe. Like I said, I'm moving over here. I'm not just coming over to visit with you once and say, here's how we did it over there. I'm open to conversations. If any of this talk has spoken to any of you at all, I'm in booth 43. Let's have a chat. I'd love to see HempFest all throughout Europe. What happens when we start getting HempFest in cities all throughout Europe? Germany drops the flag, Spain drops the flag, Portugal legalizes. We align all those dates and we have Oktoberfest for the cannabis plant. And I need your help to do it. So feel free to come and carry on the conversation. Thank you very much for your time today. Do we have a little more time? Okay. If I can just take 2 more minutes, I'd like to, this is a little bit off topic for me, but I do want to sort of leave you on this note to sort of set the tone for the rest of the talk. And that is, we've been tremendously successful in getting medical cannabis to the people who need it at this point. Medical cannabis is now widely recognized as a good medicine and is being used more and more prolifically. However, there is a very desperate need for medical cannabis for our mother planet, for our mother Earth, because she's in crisis right now. And I genuinely feel that this plant is an incredible opportunity for us. And environmentalism, environmental impacts fall disproportionately on the same shoulders of the people who are impacted by the war on drugs. So this is still very, very topical to what I'm talking about today. But I mean, we'll see a lot of hemp textiles being here today. Forests that are used to make trees, if they're replaced with hemp, you're saving the lungs of our planet, while at the same time growing many more respiring plants that you can have 3 crops out every year. Hempcrete. I've seen a bunch of hempcrete here at the show today. You've got buildings that are not only carbon negative when they're built, they continue to sequester carbon as the buildings cure. If you're dealing with normal cement, they continue to off-gas for years and years after they're done. So, food, hemp seed, hemp oil, and I have reason to believe, based on what we're seeing in Ukraine right now, that the world is probably not too far away from a very serious food crisis. Cannabis hemp can help restore the food crisis. So I can't wait for us to have all these conversations throughout today, to learn much more about this, because medical cannabis is not only extremely helpful for human beings, it's also extremely helpful for our planet. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
And I will turn it over